There are cemeteries you pass without noticing. Iron gates swallowed by ivy, headstones leaning into the earth, forgotten by everyone except the wind. And then there is Ashenhill, its stand apart, the road that leads there bends sharply at its gates, as though even the path is reluctant to step too close. On either side, cypresses line the hill in black procession, their branches knitted overhead, blotting out the sun even in midsummer. And the gates themselves, tall, iron wrought, etched with curling letters no one has managed to read. Some say it's Latin. Others insist it's older, something the stone remembers even if men do not. But what most remember about Ashenhill isn't the graves, or the gates, or even the silence. It's the man who keeps them. I saw him first on a night when the mist clung low, rolling across the moor like smoke. He was there at the threshold, tall and thin, lantern in one hand, keys in the other. The kind of figure that seemed part of the iron itself. Black coat, black hat, eyes pale as if bleached by decades of staring at tombs. He didn't speak as I approached, only raised the lantern once, the light catching on the wet bars of the gate. Behind him, the graves spread up the hill like teeth, row upon row, each crowned with crosses or angels whose faces had long since melted in the stone. "You came late," he said finally, his voice deep and hollow, as though pulled from the crypts themselves. "I wasn't aware there were hours. There are always hours. The dead keep them better than the living." The lantern's glow flickered, catching on his hands. His fingers were gray, not with dirt, but with ash, as if fire had touched them once and never quite let go. "Do you live here?" I asked. His lips curved, but not into a smile. "No one lives in Ashenhill." And then he turned, unlocking the gate. The hinges did not groan. They swung open soundlessly, like something waiting to be used again after too long a silence. The cemetery stretched upward, paths dividing the graves into neat sections that grew wilder the higher they climbed. At the crest of the hill, a chapel hunched against the stars, its steeple crooked, its windows blind. "You keep all this?" I asked. He raised the lantern once more. Its glow pooled on a stone nearest the path, where letters were cut deep and deliberate. Eleanor Gray, 1874 to 1901. But below the name, faint and almost hidden, another line had been scratched by a different hand. "Not yet." The keeper's eyes lingered on it. "I keep their time," he murmured, "and some of them are not finished." That was the first night. The night I learned that Ashenhill Cemetery was not a place where graves ended. It was a place where they waited, and the keeper was the one who held the lantern for them. The ledger of borrowed hours. By day, Ashenhill looked like a place that would eventually forgive you. Sparrows nested under the chapel eaves. Sun laced the cypress shade with loose gold. But even at noon, the air held a taste of iron, as if rain had just passed though the soil was dry. I returned with a notebook and the sort of arrogance daylight gives. The gate stood open an inch. The keeper was already there. He lifted the lantern without lighting it, an empty glass globe that still seemed to cast a circle of cooler air around our feet. "You came early," he said again. "You said there were hours." "There are, and they are not yours." He turned, expecting me to follow the same way a river expects a leaf to float with it. We passed the stone marked Eleanor Gray. Duke beaded the carved letters. The faint graffito, not yet, looked newer in the sun, as if someone had traced it with a wet finger at dawn. I touched the edge of the inscription. The stone hummed under my skin, the way a kettle hums before it sings. "Don't answer her," the keeper murmured. I didn't say anything. "You don't have to." He tapped the lantern's cold glass. "They hear us best around the edges of a wood." We climbed. The paths narrowed, gravel giving way to trodden earth. Names went by like low prayers. Abigail Marsh, Thomas Fenwick, Isaiah Rowe. Certain letters deepened by weather, others fading until the stone forgot there'd been a name at all. In the far section, the graves grew wild, angels with eroded faces leaning as if to listen to what the earth kept saying to itself. The chapel waited at the crown, stone the color of old bone, a door swollen with damp. The keeper shouldered it once, and it yielded without sound. Inside, pews furred with dust, a font dry as a shell, plaster saints whose eyes had slipped down into their cheeks with the weight of centuries. Above the apse, a round window of broken glass watched the sky like a blind pupil. On the north wall hung a bell with a black tongue, and beneath it, on a lectern stained the color of tea left too long, lay a book. Not a Bible, a ledger. He opened it. I expected neat columns, dates, names. There were those, but there were also notes in the margins, brief and precise, in a hand the color of ash. Eleanor Gray, 2:13 a.m. Knox, borrowed 1 hour. Matthew Pike, high wind, speaks mother's name, returns before dawn. Elspeth Cole, candle burned to wire, not yet scratched by unknown hand. The ink bled wider on some lines, as if the page had tried to drink more than it should. After every third or fourth entry, a symbol recurred, a small circle, half-shaded, like a coin turned in a dark palm. What does borrowed mean? I asked. He kept his eyes on the page. It means time lent, long enough for one word, sometimes two, long enough to finish a promise that will not stop rattling the coffin. A draft slid under the chapel door, carrying in the smell of rosemary and wet bark. The keeper's hands were gray to the wrists, darker in the cracks of his knuckles. Ash, he said when he saw me looking. We warm the names before we open the hour. I thought of furnaces, of ovens. He smiled without humor. No, not that. The winter brazier. We burn rosemary, you a scrape of beeswax. Smoke loosens the knot that ties a mouth shut. You let them speak. We let them finish, he said. There is a difference. He turned a page. The dates marched back a century. Then further, ink thinning to rust. I saw storms recorded as if they were people. Gale, written in capital letters. Plague, same hand, smaller. And between them, the notes of little human matters that refuse to stay buried. The key is under the hearthstone. Tell Ruth the brooch was in the hem. Forgive me for the letter I never sent. On the lectern's lip lay a length of fine wire, coiled and shining. One tip was knotted to a tiny bell, no bigger than a thimble. The other happened to dangle toward the nave, where shallow grooves scar the flagstones, a dozen narrow channels running from the doors to the front like old chalk marks. I followed one with my gaze. It disappeared under the pews, along the wall, and finally into a small hole near the far corner, where the floor had been patched. The keeper saw me seeing. Not safety coffins, he said before I could ask. No poor soul buried alive out here. The bells aren't tied to wrists. He tapped the ledger. They're tied to words. You run wires from the graves to this bell. Once, he said, now only the oldest lines still sing. Earth swallows wire faster than it swallows bone. He set 2 fingers lightly on the black tongue. Sometimes you don't need the metal. Sometimes the chapel hears without it. He closed the ledger. For a breath, I thought I saw the faintest imprint of letters glow on the cover, like coals breathed back to life. Not yet. And it was plain leather again, cracked and unremarkable. Walk with me, he said. We crossed the hilltop to a square plot walled in low stone. At its center rose a mound like a sleeping back beneath a sheet of turf. No marker, no name. A trench, he explained. For those the village insisted were finished when they weren't. Mass grave. He shook his head. Not mass. Gathered. He crouched, touched the soil as gently as a man might stroke a feverish brow. This is where we invite the long stirring to rest while we write their hour. How many? I began and stopped because the ground shifted under his palm, barely like breath in a sleep too deep to wake from. You feel it, he said, not looking up. Yes. Good. Some only hear wind and call it God. I prefer to know which voice is which. He stood, dusting ash from his hands. It left smudges on his coat cuffs that didn't brush away. We walked back down the slope by a different path, one I hadn't noticed from below. Stones here were newer. Nadia Wren, 2016. Mark Eames, 2019. The modern dates startled me. I've been thinking of Ashenhill as a relic. Instead, the line continued without a skip, steady as a pulse. At midnight, he said, as if continuing a thought I hadn't had. I will open the hour for Eleanor Gray. Because of the carving, the corner of his mouth twitched. Because she keeps knocking. You'll dig. He returned the barest look of offense. "We do not break the roof to fix the house. We make a door in the wall." He lifted the lantern, still unlit, and I realized for the first time the faintest film of soot traced its inside like the ghost of flame. "You'll stand behind me and repeat what she says until the words catch the page. If you repeat them wrong, the bell will tell you. It always does. And if I refuse," he considered. The cypresses listed in an identical wind, like a row of robed figures bowing to a saint they did not fully admire. "Then I repeat her myself, and you will dream of knocking for the rest of your life without knowing which door won't open." He left me at the gate with a nod that could have been dismissal or blessing. The road away from Ashenhill felt longer than the road and had felt. My shoes took on dust that wouldn't shake free. I meant to sit up late and steel myself with coffee and foolishness. Instead, I fell into a shallow sleep and woke with the certainty that someone had rapped softly on my window glass from the inside. Midnight came like a hell breath. The cemetery wore its true clothes again. Cypress shadow, the breath of damp earth, a thin ribbon of mist at ankle height. The keeper waited not at the gate, but halfway up the slope, beside Eleanor Gray. He had lit the lantern. The light wasn't yellow. It was the pale of milk poured thin, a color that didn't so much shine as a road darkness. He set the lantern on the stone itself, then drew from his coat a small tin. Inside lay a twist of rosemary, a thimble of beeswax, a folded square of paper gray with age. He arranged them like a priest setting the altar. "We warm the name," he said, more to the night than to me. We eased the jaw. He struck a match. It flared fox-bright, then settled. Smoke lifted, green, sour, and sweet. He held the paper above it until the edges browned, then fed it to the flame. The scent that rose was not of ink or pulp. It was rain on slate. It was iron and violets crushed underfoot. It was, absurdly, birthday cake gone stale. "Eleanor," he murmured, voice steady. "You may knock." He touched the lantern glass with 2 fingers. Somewhere, in the chapel, in the soil, a bell the size of a thimble gave a single crisp tick. I leaned closer to the stone. The air above it cooled, as if a winter window had opened just for my face. The keeper lifted the ledger and a pencil the length of a thumb bone. "Repeat," he instructed quietly. At first there was nothing. Then something brushed my teeth from the inside, like a draft through a keyhole. Words formed there, the way condensation beads on glass. I spoke them because not speaking them hurt. "Not yet," I said. The bell gave a second tick. The keeper wrote, "Quick me." Again, she says, "Not yet." Tick. Tell. The word stuck. I swallowed. Smoke and violets flooded my mouth. "Tell. Henry, the ribbon is under the bell rang a tiny, furious peal. Wrong. I blinked tears. Not ribbon. Not ribbon. The taste shifted. The robin. The robin is under the sill. It won't fly. He'll think it sleeps. He must not bury it. The bell stilled. The keeper's pencil whispered. Borrowed hour opened. He said, "Not to me, not to Eleanor, but to the hill itself." Word taken. Word corrected. Word kept. The smoke thinned. The cold on my lip eased. I realized I'd been leaning so hard into the stone that the carved dates had marked my skin. "Sometimes it's nonsense," he said softly, closing the ledger. "Sometimes it saves a life. We don't choose which. We only choose whether we listen." We stood in the hush that follows a task done as well as it could be. Beyond the cypresses, a fox yipped. 3 quick notes, then gone. "Will she knock again?" I asked. He set the cold lantern in my hands. It weighted them without weight. "They all do," he said, "until what they borrowed is paid." As we turned away, I felt, very faintly, 3 soft taps along my ribs, as if someone inside the cage of bone had rapped politely to be let out. I didn't look back. I was afraid I would answer. The graves that refuse silence. The morning after Eleanor Gray's voice was written, I carried the heaviness of her unfinished words like a weight under my ribs. The robin is under the sill. He must not bury it. I told myself it was nonsense. A fragment of memory, a child's riddle, some piece of life left behind in 1901. But even as I walked the narrow road away from Ashenhill, I could still feel the ghost of 3 taps along my ribs. and worse, the faintest chill on my lips where I had breathed her words into the night. The village at the hill's foot lives with Ashenhill the way some towns live with weather, resigned, wary, pretending to ignore it while never quite forgetting it's there. The innkeeper slid my mug across the counter that morning and said only, "You went up." I nodded. He didn't ask more. Instead, he leaned closer. "If you're foolish enough to keep going back, you'll hear them. Not just the keeper, the graves." I tried to laugh, but his eyes stayed flat. "They're not whispers," he said. "Whispers are kind. These are scratches, the kind that make you wake with dirt under your nails." He straightened, as if embarrassed by his own words, and busied himself with mugs that were already clean. I should have left then, packed my things, boarded the next train, left the hill to its silence. But something in me felt caught, like a thread hooked on a nail, tugging tighter each time I tried to step away. By dusk, I was climbing the hill again. The gates yawned wider this time, iron mouths swallowing me whole. The keeper waited not at the path, but in the chapel, where a thin coil of smoke drifted from the brazier. The ledger lay open, its pages furred with damp, ink spidering wider than the lines meant for it. He did not greet me. He did not need to. His pale eyes flicked once to the pew beside the lectern. On it lay objects. A locket cracked down the hinge. A child's shoe, stiff with rot. A fragment of bone the size of a bird's wing. "These," he said, his voice carrying as if the chapel itself spoke with him, "are the graves that refuse silence." I leaned closer. The locket clicked faintly, though no hand touched it. The shoe seemed to breathe, its leather flexing. And the bone was warm. "They knock louder than Eleanor," he said. "They knock until something answers. If we write their words, the hill sleeps. If we don't, the hill opens." He turned a page in the ledger. Fresh lines gleamed wet, though no ink pot stood nearby. I saw names not yet dead written there. One of them was mine. "The hill writes what it will take," the keeper murmured, following my gaze. "It begins with those who listen. The hour you lent Eleanor, it was not free." I felt cold spread through me, ribs to fingers, as if her 3 taps had gone deeper, rooting in side bone. "What happens," I asked, my throat dry, "if I stop coming back?" His pale eyes met mine, steady as the flame. "Then the knocking moves to your door." Behind him, the chapel's black bell gave a faint tick. Once, twice, as if something far below the hill had already begun. The bone under the floor. The chapel smelled of smoke and rain-soaked stone. The brazier hissed faintly, rosemary still smoldering in its ash. The bell's tiny tick had not stopped since I entered, each sound like a nail being tapped into the back of my skull. The keeper stood motionless before the lectern, eyes pale, ledger open to the page where my own name now waited among the others. I wanted to ask him who had written it. Instead, I asked a smaller question. "What is that ticking?" He didn't look up. "The floor is listening." The chapel's flagstones were uneven, patched in places, seams filled with black mortar. I glanced down, and for the first time noticed a faint swelling under the nave's center tile, as though the ground beneath it was breathing. "Not every grave accepts the hill's patience," the keeper murmured. He knelt, brushing his gray fingers across the seam. "Some insist." The bone he had shown me earlier, the fragment like a bird's wing, lay now at the lectern's base. Without touching it, he nudged it nearer to the swelling stone. The ticking bell stopped, and the tile cracked down the middle. A sliver of air exhaled from the gap, damp and foul, carrying a smell like wet feathers and rust. The keeper did not recoil. He lifted the lantern, its pale light falling into the split. The bone trembled, rolled forward, and slipped neatly into the gap as though pulled. Something below caught it. I heard the scrape of nails on stone, long and deliberate. Then a voice, dry as parchment, pressed itself up through the floor. It was not mine. They put it in my hands and said it was. But it was not mine. The keeper opened the ledger, waiting for me. "Repeat." The words snagged in my throat. I didn't want them in my mouth. But the pressure built, the same draft-through teeth I had felt with Eleanor Gray. If I didn't speak, it would break something in me. It says, "It was not mine. They put it in my hands and said it was." But it was not mine. The bell gave a soft approving chime, a sound more final than any amen. The keeper's pencil scratched the page. Borrowed hour opened. Bone returned. Word kept. The tiles settled. The crack did not heal, but the swelling stilled. Whatever pressed from below had taken the bone, had taken its chance to insist, and had retreated. I sagged against the pew. Would I just answer? The keeper closed the ledger. His voice was calm, as if giving directions to a lost traveler. You answered the one who lies under the floor. There's no marker, no stone. Some names are buried twice. Once in earth, once in shame. It is the second burial that makes them knock loudest. I tried to imagine who it was what not mine meant, a crime, a child, a life stolen or forced into their hands. But the thought curdled as quickly as it came, because beneath my ribs, I felt it again. 3 soft taps, then a fourth. Not Eleanor this time. Someone else had found the door inside me. The keeper shut the ledger and lifted the lantern higher, the pale light spreading against the chapel walls. You understand now, he said. Every silence is borrowed. Every stone will wake. And when it does, it will look for someone to carry its word. His eyes settled on me, unreadable, patient as the hill. You are listening, he said. That is enough. From below the chapel, a faint chorus stirred. Not one voice, but many. The sound was not words yet, not knocking. It was breathing, and it was getting closer. The hour of the open graves. The chorus beneath the chapel rose slowly, like water filling a cellar. It wasn't words yet, but the rhythm of breath, hundreds of lungs that should not have remembered how. The candle on the lectern guttered, as if their inhaling had drawn the air. From the room, the keeper did not flinch. He set his hand on the ledger's cover and spoke in a tone so even it might have been a prayer. Not all at once. The breathing stilled, but not completely. It retreated into the soil, into the flagstones, into the trees outside. The silence that followed was worse than the sound, for I could feel every grave waiting, each one pressed against its coffin lid like a mouth against a locked door. Why tonight? I whispered. He looked at me as though surprised I had not already guessed. Because you repeated her words. Eleanor Gray, you let the hill taste your voice. Once it has the shape of you, the others recognize it. They crowd closer. They want their hour too. And what happens, I asked, if too many come at once? The keeper's lantern dimmed. Then Ashenhill forgets which side of the earth is the grave. That night, he walked me beyond the chapel, lantern swinging a pale circle over leaning angels and weather-bitten stones. The air thickened as we climbed, every breath tasting of iron and violets, every step heavier. The ground began to change. Not a swelling this time, not a single cracked tile. The soil itself pulsed. Small depressions opened and shut in the grass like lips mouthing names. He stopped before 3 stones clustered close together, all belonging to the same family. The dates were 1899, 1901, 1903, children taken in quick succession. The carvings were sharp still, as if the grief that made them had cut deeper than weather could erode. They will knock together, he murmured. And when they do, we must give them one mouth. The bell in the chapel rang once, though we were far from it. The lantern's glow trembled. Then, from the 3 stones at our feet, came a sound that hollowed me. 3 voices, whispering the same syllable, broken, incomplete. Re, re, re. The keeper knelt, pressed the ash of rosemary against each marker. Repeat them as one, he instructed. What if I can't? Then they'll tear the word apart and never stop, and the hill will open. I swallowed the cold in my throat and leaned close. The voices pressed against my teeth the way Eleanor's had, only multiplied, like a flock battering itself against a window. Re, I steadied, forced them into one. Remember, the bell struck again, louder, approving. The soil quieted. The syllables smoothed into a single breath, long and final. The keeper wrote in the ledger by lantern light. Borrowed hour opened. 3 bound as 1. Word corrected. I staggered back, knees weak. What did they mean? Remember what? He closed the book. Not for us to decide. It may be a toy buried with them. It may be the name of their mother. It may be God himself. We don't need to know. We only need to carry it. I wanted to shout at him, at his calm, at his acceptance. But I didn't, because the air had grown heavier again. All around us, more stones swelled. More voices whispered, rising. 100 mouths preparing to open. The keeper raised the lantern, face pale in its glow. "This," he said, "is the hour of the open graves." And the bell rang again, not once but many times, as though the chapel itself were drowning in voices. The bell that won't stop. The bell began faintly, the tick I had grown used to, but within moments it was a torrent. 100 thimble bells, all striking at once. Their clamor rolled across the hillside until even the cypress branches rattled with it. I pressed my hands to my ears. It didn't help. The sound wasn't only in the air, it was inside bone, hammering marrow against marrow. The keeper did not move. His lantern swayed with each peal, pale light washing across the stones. His lips barely parted as he whispered, "They all want their hour." Every grave seemed to shift. The earth rippled in small waves, headstones rocking in their sockets. Voices poured up from the soil, scraps, fragments, broken syllables torn from different throats. "Mina, waited, tell her, not yet, not yet, not." It was unbearable, a chorus of the unfinished, every word demanding, every name clawing upward. I turned to the keeper. "How do we stop it?" He closed the ledger with a thud, pressing it hard against his chest. "You don't stop it. You silence it. And silence always takes pain." The hill groaned. Soil cracked at my feet, roots snapping in the dark beneath. A hand, gray and brittle, pushed through the grass before crumbling back to ash. Then another, then a dozen. The bell kept ringing. The keeper reached into his coat and drew out something I hadn't seen before, a knife. Its blade was blackened, as though burned in a fire that had never gone out. "It wants a keeper," he said. His voice was as steady as the tolling was wild. "Always one to write, one to bear the words. If the bell rings too long, the hill chooses for itself." He pressed the knife into my palm. Its handle was ice. "Blood steadies the ledger," he said. "Yours or mine, it doesn't matter. But someone must feed the bell." I shook my head. "You mean sacrifice?" He did not answer. Instead, he raised the lantern high. Its light pierced the mist, falling across the chapel door. There, the bell swung wildly, though no rope moved it, the clapper striking so hard I thought the iron might shatter. "They'll tear the hill open," he said. "And if they do, there'll be no silence left for anyone, living or dead." The earth lurched again. Cracks split the turf, yawning into dark mouths. From them spilled a breath so foul it turned my stomach. Wet feathers, iron, and the rod of roses long dead. The voices surged. 1,000 broken words pressed against me at once, so loud they drowned each other. "Right US, right US, right US." The knife shook in my hand. The keeper's pale eyes fixed on me, hard as stone. "Choose," he said. "Either bleed for them, or let the hill break." I lifted the knife. The bell pealed again, deafening. My name pulsed in the ledger, glowing faintly through its shut cover. And for one sickening moment, I understood. It wasn't just silence the hill demanded. It wanted to finish writing me, the debt of blood. The knife's weight grew heavier the longer I held it, though the blade was thin as a whisper. The keeper stood without blinking, lantern steady, as if he had placed this moment before me 100 times already. The hill screamed. The bell's peals came so fast, they blurred into one continuous shriek. Headstones cracked. Soil heaved. Hands and half-formed faces broke the surface before collapsing into ash. Every grave demanded, every silence begged, every unfinished word battered itself against me. Right, right, right. The ledger trembled on the keeper's chest. My name pulsed through its cover, faint as a heart behind ribs. I raised the knife, my palm slick with sweat, though the steel stayed cold. "Whose blood?" I shouted above the bell. The keeper's lips curved, not in cruelty, but in resignation. "A keeper's. Always a keeper's. That is the debt. And if I refuse?" The lantern's flame dimmed. His eyes caught what little light remained. "Then you've already been chosen. You'll bleed whether you will it or not." The ground split open in a line that ran straight to my feet. A grave yawning wider, stones toppling into its hollow. From below, 1,000 voices exhaled my name all at once. Not shouted, not whispered, exhaled, as if they had already practiced saying it for years. I pressed the blade against my palm. The edge was keen. Even the faintest pressure drew a line of fire. The bell's shriek wavered, bending towards silence as if listening. The keeper guided my hand with his own. His touch was colder than the blade. Blood steadies the hill, he said. It doesn't end it. Nothing ends it. But without the mark, there is no keeper, and the graves will not rest. I drew the knife across skin. The pain was bright, the cut shallow but true. Blood welled, black in the lantern's ghost light. The bell choked, then rang once, just once, and the graves fell still. The soil settled. The cracks closed. The air cleared of rot. Only a faint humming lingered, low and ceaseless, like the echo of a choir refusing to leave the last note unsung. The keeper took the knife back, wiped it with ash, and slipped it into his coat. He opened the ledger and pressed my bleeding palm against the page where my name waited. The paper drank the blood eagerly, sealing the letters in red. There, he said, the debt is kept. I pulled my hand away. The cut still bled, though slower now, pulsing faintly in time with the bell's silence. What happens now? I asked. The keeper shut the book. His pale eyes softened in something like pity. Now you listen, he said, until it's your turn to hold the lantern. The graves lay quiet, but I knew their hour had only been delayed. My voice already ached with the weight of words I had not spoken yet, words waiting in the dark. And beneath my ribs, the knocking began again. 3 taps, then a 4th. The last lantern. The hill was still, but not silent. The stillness was the kind of quiet that follows a scream. Not relief, but the ringing absence of it. I walked behind the keeper toward the chapel, each step heavy, as if the graves had pressed chains around my ankles. Inside, the black bell hung motionless. The brazier had gone out, leaving only the ledger open on the lectern, its pages faintly pulsing as though breathing. My blood, still fresh on the paper, gleamed red in the lantern's pale light. The keeper set the knife beside it and lowered the lantern carefully, reverently, as though placing a crown back on its stand. This is where you leave me, he said. I stared at him. What do you mean? His lips pulled thin. No one keeps Ashenhill forever. The hill demands a changing of hands. Tonight it asked for you. Your blood answered. That is enough. No, I said. My voice cracked against the chapel stone. I didn't agree to this. You think I agreed? His pale eyes flared for the first time with something like fire. I was chosen the same way. A borrowed hour, a mistake spoken aloud, a little blood on a page. That's all it takes. That's all it ever takes. The bell gave a faint tick, though it hadn't moved. The keeper stepped closer, lowering his voice. Do you hear it now? It isn't ringing anymore. It's listening. To you. I realized with horror that he was right. The hum I felt under my ribs wasn't only in me. It resonated with the bell, with the graves, with the hill itself. The hill was listening through me. I looked at the lantern. Its light had dimmed, but it hadn't gone out. The glass glowed faintly, pale as milk, shadows curling inside it like smoke. The keeper followed my gaze. That flame has passed through more hands than I can name. Each keeper holds it until the hill writes them into the ledger, and then he opened his gray palms. They become ash. Is that what happened to the one before you? He nodded once, and the one before her, and the one before him. I found only their names crossed out in the ledger, their blood dried brown in its spine. The lantern hissed, the shadows inside shifting like restless figures. My chest tightened. What if I refuse? I asked again, desperate now. The keeper's voice was soft, final. You can't. The moment you bled on the page, Ashenhill wrote you. It isn't a choice. It's a turn in a circle that never stops. His eyes, pale as stone, lingered on me. I carried it longer than most. But even I am written now. He lifted his sleeve. Across his wrist and up his arm, faint red letters had begun to scrawl themselves. Names I didn't recognize, cut into the skin by an invisible hand. They've started knocking in me, he said, Soon I'll be only another voice. The bell ticked once, then again, louder. The keeper pressed the lantern into my hands. Listen well. The hill never sleeps. It only waits. Keep the ledger close. Warn the names when they knock. Give them their hour, or they'll take it by force. And when your time comes, he faltered. His breath clouded, though the air was still. His outline wavered like smoke in a draft. When your time comes, he whispered, past the lantern. Do not let it die. His body collapsed into ash before me, sifting into the chapel's flagstones, leaving only his coat, the knife, and the ledger. The pale flame shuddered once, then steadied in my hands. The bell above the apse rang clear and low. Not a scream this time. A toll. Acknowledgement. The hill had its new keeper. I set the lantern on the lectern. The ledger lay open, my blood-darkened name glowing faintly, the letters trembling as if eager for more. From outside, across the graves, the knocking began again. Hundreds of them, patient and polite as rain on windows. Next, next, next. That was the first night I kept Ashenhill Cemetery, and it will not be the last.